The courtroom buzzed with tension, lawyers flipping through papers, the judge tapping his gavel, jurors whispering among themselves. And then, it happened. A police officer, tall, broad and smug, stormed across the room. His boots thudded against the floor. His eyes locked on one person, a black woman standing with her case files, completely unaware of what was coming. Her name was Maya Lawson. Her crime? Existing in the wrong room. Officer Daniel Briggs grabbed her without warning. "You do not belong here." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Maya's face? Calm, unshaken, because he had no idea who she really was. And by the time he found out, it would already be too late. The courtroom was alive with low murmurs. Lawyers shuffled papers, jurors adjusted their seats, and the faint scratching of a stenographer's keys filled the air. The judge sat on his high bench, flipping through case files, unbothered. For most, this was just another trial. For Maya Lawson, it was the day everything changed. She stood tall, a stack of legal documents in her arms. Her navy blue blazer fitted perfectly, exuding confidence and professionalism. She had worked years for this moment. Years of law school, late nights, and battling a system that had never been designed for her. But today, she was here. She was ready. She took a step toward the judge's bench. And then, the courtroom doors slammed open. The heavy stomp of boots echoed through the chamber. The energy shifted, the murmurs died, and every eye turned toward the entrance. Officer Daniel Briggs, tall, built like a brick wall. His police uniform stretched tight over his broad shoulders, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Maya barely had time to react before. A rough hand clamped onto her arm, firm, unrelenting. "I said, you do not belong here," Briggs growled, his fingers digging into her sleeve like a predator holding its prey. A ripple of gasps spread through the courtroom. Maya's spine stiffened, but her expression did not waver. The room froze. She could feel the tension, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What was happening? Briggs's grip tightened. Her heart pounded, but her face remained unreadable. She wasn't about to give him the reaction he wanted. She had dealt with men like him before. Men who thought power was measured by how much they could take from others. She tilted her head slightly, her voice controlled. "I think you should let go of me." Briggs scoffed, laughed. "This is a courtroom, not the streets. You have no business being here." His words dripped with arrogance, with racism, with the certainty that he was in control. The silence stretched. A lawyer in the gallery whispered, "Oh no, he does not know." A jury member shifted uncomfortably. The judge raised an eyebrow. But Briggs? He only tightened his hold. The arrogance in his smirk was unbearable. "Who do you think you are?" he sneered. And then, she smiled. Not out of fear, not out of nervousness, but because she knew something he didn't. "I was about to ask you the same thing." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed over Briggs's face. The judge finally leaned forward. The courtroom held its breath. And that was when Briggs realized his downfall had already begun. The gavel struck against the wood. The judge's voice cut through the heavy silence. "Officer Briggs, release her. Now." Briggs didn't move. His fingers remained tight around Maya's arm. For a moment, the entire courtroom stood still. No one breathed. No one spoke. It was one of those moments where power, control, and arrogance collide at the center of a room, and everyone waits to see who wins. But Maya already knew the answer. She knew Briggs had no idea what he was doing. She could feel the way the room shifted, the way people looked at her differently now. And yet, Briggs tightened his grip, doubled down. "She's trespassing," he muttered, his voice firm, unyielding. "I'm handling it." The whispers started. First, a low ripple, barely audible. Then, they spread. A lawyer at the defense table shook his head. A juror, muttering something under her breath. The prosecutor, watching Briggs closely, his eyes dark with warning. Maya? She just adjusted her blazer. A silent move. Measured. Calculated. Briggs did not like that. He hated that. He let out a short, mocking laugh. "You're seriously trying to tell me you're a lawyer?" Maya's expression did not change. She only tilted her head, studying him like he was an experiment. "Why do not you check my credentials?" And that was the moment the room exploded. Gasps. A few stunned murmurs. The gallery leaned forward, some clutching their phones, recording every second. Even the bailiff, the man responsible for courtroom security, looked stunned. Briggs hesitated. Just for a second. His arrogance? It was still there, but it was cracking. Just a little. I don't need to check anything, he muttered. But he did, and he knew it. Maya turned slightly, giving the entire courtroom a clear view of her expression. Calm, composed, unshaken. Her confidence infuriated Briggs. So, he snapped, I don't care who you say you are. You're resisting an officer's command. Another round of gasps. Someone in the jury whispered, Oh, he's done. The judge's eyes darkened. Officer Briggs, I will not repeat myself. Release her. Briggs hesitated again, and that was his biggest mistake. The prosecutor stood up sharply, his chair screeching against the marble floor. He had seen enough. Your Honor, he said, voice sharp, commanding attention. I would like it noted that Officer Briggs is actively detaining a practicing attorney inside a courtroom without cause. A deafening silence followed. Maya's lips twitched, not in amusement, not in relief, but in pure, calculated satisfaction. Briggs blinked. Once, twice. Then, his face turned red. Maya took a small step forward, her voice quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the tension. Do you realize what you have done, officer? Briggs said nothing. Could not. Would not. His eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for support, for someone to defend him. But no one would. The jury, frozen. The spectators, recording every second. The judge, leaning forward, waiting to see if Briggs would dig his own grave deeper. And then, the courtroom doors swung open. A bailiff rushed in, clipboard in hand, face pale. Your Honor, there's an issue. The judge's brow furrowed. What kind of issue? The bailiff hesitated, glancing at Maya, then back at Briggs. And then he spoke. Security footage shows that Officer Briggs intercepted Miss Lawson upon entering. He never verified her identity before grabbing her. The gallery erupted. Shocked murmurs, outrage, disbelief. And Maya didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react. She didn't need to, because her job was already done. Briggs had already lost. The judge's gavel struck the bench. Officer Briggs, step back, now. Briggs staggered. For the first time, his confidence wavered. His arrogance shattered. And as Maya dusted off her blazer, straightening her posture, she finally looked him in the eyes. You never checked my credentials. A deadly pause. So allow me to introduce myself properly. She reached into her bag, pulled out a sleek black folder. She flipped it open, and held it up for the entire courtroom to see. A law license. State certified. Official. Undeniable. The final nail in Briggs's coffin. The prosecutor smirked. The judge exhaled, shaking his head. The jury. Some shook their heads. Others, smiling, amused, entertained. And Officer Briggs, he had just realized what he had done. Maya's lips curled upward. You tried to manhandle the wrong woman today, officer. Briggs. He just stood there, speechless. And the courtroom? It was just getting started. The smirk faded from Officer Briggs's face. A bailiff took a cautious step forward. Sir, maybe you should... Briggs whipped around, eyes flashing. Stay out of this, he barked. The entire courtroom tensed. Judge Whitmore's fingers tightened around the gavel. His gaze, dark, unyielding, unimpressed. Officer Briggs, stand down. Briggs let out a slow breath, rolled his shoulders. With all due respect, Your Honor, I'm just doing my job. The gavel struck. Boom. A thunderous sound that echoed across the courtroom. No. The judge's voice was ice cold. You are ruining your career. Silence. Deep. Cold. Unforgiving. Briggs blinked. A flicker of doubt, but only a flicker. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. He still thought he could fight his way out of this. But Maya? Maya had already won. She exhaled. Slow. Unshaken. Then she reached into her bag. Deliberate. Controlled. And she pulled out a document. She held it up. Clear. Bold. Undeniable. Her bar certification. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The prosecutor stood up, his jaw tight. The bailiff? Eyes wide. Even the jury, some of whom had been watching in quiet amusement, now leaned forward, fully engaged. Judge Whitmore slowly leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Miss Lawson, what is that document? Maya's lips curled upward. My state-certified law license, Your Honor. Boom. The entire courtroom lost it. Murmurs, gasps, a flood of reactions. Briggs didn't move, couldn't move, because for the first time in his life, he was afraid. The judge stared at the document for a moment. Then he turned back to Briggs. Officer, would you care to explain why you just physically detained a practicing attorney in open court? Briggs's throat bobbed. His palms sweated. I didn't know. Oh, you didn't know. Maya's voice cut through him like a blade. She took a step forward. Briggs instinctively stepped back. She took another step, and so did he. For the first time ever, he was the one backing down. The entire courtroom watched, enjoyed, absorbed every second. Even the judge let it play out. Briggs stammered, his hands twitching at his sides. I thought. You thought what? Maya challenged. No anger, no shouting, just power. Pure, controlled, undeniable power. Briggs's eyes darted around, looking for a way out, looking for backup, looking for someone, anyone, to save him. But no one would. No one could. The judge tapped his gavel against the wood. Officer Briggs, I will ask one more time. Do you have an explanation for this? Briggs's mouth opened, but no words came out, because there was nothing left to say. Maya took another step forward, right into his space. Officer Briggs, do you know what obstruction of justice is? Briggs swallowed hard. The prosecutor crossed his arms. The jury, loving every second. Even the bailiff, barely containing his smirk. Because right now, Maya continued, not only have you physically detained an attorney without cause, but you have directly interfered with judicial proceedings. Briggs stiffened. And obstruction, she said, her voice dripping with finality, is a crime. The courtroom lost it. Gasps, shouts, a storm of reactions. The judge held up a hand, bringing the room back under control. But the damage was done. Briggs was cornered, trapped. His badge wouldn't save him. His uniform meant nothing now. Maya tilted her head. Your Honor, I request that this officer be immediately placed on leave pending investigation. The judge nodded instantly. Approved. Briggs snapped his head up. Wait, what? The bailiff stepped forward. Officer Briggs, you need to come with me. Briggs took a step back. His hands shook. No, this isn't fair. Maya, she just smiled. Neither was what you did to me. And then, the final blow. The prosecutor stepped in. Your Honor, in light of today's events, I request a review of Officer Briggs's prior cases for misconduct. Briggs froze. The final nail in his coffin. Judge Whitmore nodded. Approved. The courtroom exploded again. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashed, and Officer Briggs, he finally understood. He was done. As the bailiff placed a firm hand on his shoulder, leading him out, Maya spoke one last time. Next time, Officer Briggs. He turned, eyes desperate. Choose your battles more wisely. The door slammed shut behind him. And the courtroom belonged to Maya Lawson now. The courtroom exploded. Gasps, murmurs, shockwaves of realization. Briggs's face drained of all color. His chest rose and fell too fast, his power slipping like sand through his fingers. The prosecutor stood up, slow, deliberate. His expression, sharp, cold, unforgiving. Officer Briggs, his voice cut through the chaos. Do you have any idea what you just did? Briggs's throat bobbed. He looked around. The judge, the attorneys, the jury, searching for backup, but no one met his gaze. For the first time, he was alone. The judge exhaled sharply. Frustration burned behind his glasses. Officer Briggs, stand down, now. Briggs blinked rapidly, still holding on to some twisted illusion of control. Your Honor, You thought wrong. The judge's voice turned ice cold. The jury whispered among themselves. The court reporter's fingers trembled over the keyboard. The gallery buzzed. People knew they were witnessing something historic. And Maya? She simply tilted her head, voice steady. Would you like me to spell my name for you? Laughter. Mocking laughter. Briggs's nostrils flared. His fists clenched. His world crumbling around him. You're telling me you're a lawyer? Briggs spat, trying to regain control. Maya nodded once. Calm, collected, unshaken. That's right. She took a step closer. And not just any lawyer. She turned to the judge. A silent cue. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, clasping his hands. Officer Briggs, allow me to introduce Ms. Maya Lawson. A pause. A long, gut-wrenching pause. Then, one of the most successful civil rights attorneys in this city. Briggs froze. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. The whispers, now deafening. The prosecutor smirked. a rare sight. "Officer Briggs, I suggest you take a seat." Briggs's face burned red. "I was just doing my job," he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya let out a small, humorless laugh. "No, Officer Briggs, you were abusing your power." She took another step forward. "You didn't see a lawyer when you looked at me. You saw a woman. You saw a black woman, and that was enough for you." Briggs's mouth opened and closed, words failing him. For the first time, he realized what he had done. The judge removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. "Officer Briggs, do you even understand the legal implications of your actions?" Briggs's jaw tightened. "It was a misunderstanding." "No, it was a violation," the prosecutor interrupted, voice sharp as a blade. "A serious one." Maya tapped her temple, mocking thoughtfulness. "Let's list them off, shall we?" She turned toward the jury, holding up one finger. "False accusation." Another finger. "Unlawful detainment." Another. "Abuse of authority." Her eyes bored into Briggs's skull. "And that's just the beginning." Briggs's chest heaved, his knees locked, the weight of reality finally crashing down on him. The judge leaned back, staring at Briggs like he was already a lost cause. "This is not looking good for you, officer." Briggs shook his head wildly, searching for an escape. I was just trying to keep order." Maya's laughter cut through the air. "Order?" Her eyes darkened. "You mean control?" Briggs gritted his teeth. He had been the predator all his life. Now, he was the prey. A bailiff stepped forward. "Your Honor," his voice hesitant, "should I escort Officer Briggs out?" The crowd went silent again. All eyes locked onto the judge. The judge tapped his fingers against the bench, thinking, calculating, deciding. Briggs stared at him, breath caught in his throat. Then, "No." Briggs's body sagged with relief. Too soon. "Not yet." The judge's voice was deadly calm. "I want him to sit here and listen." Briggs's stomach dropped. Maya smirked. "Good idea, Your Honor, because I'm just getting started." The courtroom buzzed with energy. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Camera flashes went off. This was going to make headlines. Briggs, who once thrived on power, now sat exposed. A cornered animal, a sinking ship. And Maya? She stood taller than ever, unshaken, unstoppable, because this time, justice was on her side. A bailiff wheeled in a screen. A hush fell over the courtroom. Briggs shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of how hot the room felt. "Let us review the facts," Judge Whitmore announced, voice steady. The screen flickered to life. Security footage loaded. Briggs swallowed hard, his hands clenched against his knees. Then, the video played. Briggs grabbing Maya, shoving her. Her expression, calm, powerful, unshaken. His, filled with arrogance. The jury gasped. A murmur spread across the room. The reporters leaned forward, pens scratching furiously. Briggs's own colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And Maya? She just watched. Expression unreadable, arms crossed, like she had already won. The video continued. "You do not belong here." Briggs's voice boomed through the speakers. Then, his hand wrapped around Maya's arm. A sharp jerk, her head snapping back slightly from the force. Another gasp. Someone in the gallery muttered under their breath. "Disgusting." Briggs gritted his teeth. The screen froze. The image stayed. A moment in time he could never take back. Briggs, gripping Maya's arm like a predator closing in, Judge Whitmore leaned forward. "Officer Briggs," his voice echoed in the silence. "Do you deny this?" Briggs' throat went dry. He paused. No excuse would work. No lie could erase what everyone had just seen. He shook his head, because for the first time, he had nothing to say. The prosecutor stood up. A slow, deliberate movement. "Your Honor," his voice cut through the tension. "I motion for legal action against Officer Briggs." Briggs's breath hitched. Maya tilted her head, eyes locked on him. Not with anger, not even with hatred, with certainty, because she knew how this ended. Judge Whitmore took his time. He tapped his fingers against the bench. The weight of his decision hung over the room like a storm cloud. Then, "Motion granted." The gavel slammed down. Briggs staggered. The courtroom erupted. A reporter rushed toward the door, already calling in a breaking story. Briggs shook his head violently. "Wait." But no one was listening anymore. It was over. And this time, he was the one being judged. The next morning, Briggs strode into the precinct, expecting business as usual. Coffee in hand, badge clipped, gun holstered, But something was off. The air felt different, tense, too quiet. He paused in the doorway. Officers stood stiff, avoiding his gaze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. All eyes shifted, not toward him. Away, like he was a walking disease. His stomach twisted. What the hell is going on? Then, a door creaked open. Internal affairs. Waiting, 4 of them. Suits crisp, expressions cold. Behind them, the police chief, standing rigid, arms folded, eyes steel. Daniel Briggs. Briggs's throat bobbed. His chest tightened. No way. No faking way. He forced a smirk, trying to play it off. Morning, Chief. Hand over your badge and gun. His breath hitched. Silence swallowed the room. Officers shifted uncomfortably. Briggs laughed once, a dry, humorless sound. Chief, you cannot be serious. He was. This is absurd, Briggs snapped. He reached for his badge, stopped, fingers curling around the metal. It felt heavy now, like it knew it no longer belonged to him. His gun? Heavier. Reluctantly, he placed them both on the desk, a final clink, like a gavel slamming down on his life. Wait! 2 officers stepped forward. Briggs backed up. Number, you do not get to do this. Internal Affairs did not blink. Daniel Briggs, you are under arrest for misconduct, abuse of power, and unlawful detainment. Briggs stared. His heart pounded in his ears. This is a joke. You all know me. His so-called brothers in blue? Silent. Watching. Doing nothing. Then, the handcuffs clicked. His handcuffs. The same ones he had slapped onto Maya, onto others. For the first time, he had no power. A reporter's voice broke through the glass doors. Officer Briggs, how does it feel? Briggs's face burned. He kept his head down as cameras flashed. The world watched him fall. And somewhere, Maya was watching too. Knowing justice had finally been served. The news cycle detonated like a bomb. Breaking, racist cop arrests black lawyer, then finds out who she really is. Screens blared the headline across every network. News anchors, shaking their heads. Legal analysts, ripping Briggs apart. The public, livid. Social media set ablaze. Clips of Briggs yanking Maya's arm played on repeat. Millions watched his downfall unfold. Hashtags exploded. Justice for Maya. Fire Briggs. Cops are not above the law. Retweets skyrocketed. Briggs's face? Plastered everywhere. Shamed. Exposed. And there was nothing he could do about it. Outside the precinct, chaos. Hundreds gathered. Signs waved high. Enough is enough. Hold racist cops accountable. Chants echoed through the streets. Reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Everyone wanted a statement. And Maya? She stepped outside, victorious. Microphones shoved toward her. Ms. Lawson, what do you have to say? She adjusted her blazer. Her voice? Unshaken. This is not just about me. This is about every person who has ever been mistreated by the system. The crowd cheered. Maya walked away. Not just as a lawyer, but as a symbol. Of justice. Of power. Of change. Briggs. He sat alone in a holding cell. Phone confiscated. Job? Gone. Pension? Stripped. His whole world crumbled. And for the first time in his life, he felt what it was like to be truly powerless. Briggs sat alone. No badge, no gun, no power. Just silence. The same cold walls he had thrown others into, now caged him. His hands shook. His uniform, once a symbol of power, now felt like a joke. He had spent years treating people like they were beneath him. Now, he was beneath everyone. The news spread like wildfire. Racist cop arrests black lawyer, instant karma. TV stations played the courtroom footage on repeat. Social media exploded. Protests filled the streets. People demanded accountability, not just for Briggs, for every corrupt officer like him. The police department scrambled for damage control. The chief of police issued a public statement. We do not condone Officer Briggs's actions. He has been placed on indefinite suspension. But the people were not fooled. The pressure was too much. 1 day later, Briggs was fired. His pension, gone. His future, ruined. Outside the courthouse, Maya stood tall. Reporters crowded her, cameras flashing. The world wanted her statement, but she didn't rush. She took a long breath, let the moment sink in. Then, she smirked. Racism has consequences. She turned, walked away, and the whole city cheered.